Welcome to the Daily History Podcast, where time unwinds and history comes alive. Today, we step onto the medieval battlegrounds to uncover the profound saga of the Hundred Years' War, a tale of kings and commoners, of longbows and lasting legacies. This is history like you've never heard before. Ready the siege engines and unfurl your banners. Let's march into the past together. Imagine a landscape suspended in time, where stone castles loom over mist-covered fields and knights clad in steel uphold the honor of their lords. It is the early 14th century in Europe, a period tangled in the web of feudal allegiances, where kingdoms vie for power with the prophetic belief that God willed their dominion. Against this backdrop, two thrones face an impending clash that would scar the continent for over 100 years. The death of the last Capetian king of France, Charles IV, in 1328, has left a void and a contested legacy. Nobles stir and whisper of bloodlines and birthrights, as England's King Edward III prepares a daring claim on the French crown through his mother, Isabella of France, sister to the late king. With Edward's assertion comes the spark of the Hundred Years' War. It is a battle over who would wear the crown of France, a war that would redefine the very nature of kingship and nationhood. England, confident and ambitious, leverages its feudal claims, while France, determined to reject the foreign claimant, stands ready to defend its sovereign soil. The year is 1337, and as Edward III crosses the narrow channel separating England from France, the echoes of clashing armies are all but imminent. It's not merely a war of succession, but a colossal struggle that will test the resolve of the men and women who call these warring nations home. This is the dawn of a century-spanning conflict, the opening gambit in a Game of Thrones that history will never forget. As we peer into the heart of the Hundred Years' War, we uncover a struggle for power as grand as the crown for which it was waged. The spark of this extended conflict lies in the claims to the French throne, a prize wrapped in velvet but edged with the promise of iron and blood. It's the early 14th century, and England's Edward III presses his birthright as grandson to the merry monarch, Philip the Fair. On the opposite side, we have Philip VI of France, the first of the Valois, contesting the same throne through the Salic law, which bars inheritance through the female line. Not merely a feud of kin and kind, these were the tapestries of feudal and dynastic disputes, woven intricately across generations and geographies. Feudalism was more than just a word. It was the scaffold upon which societies of the Middle Ages were constructed. Lords and vassals, bound by oaths, parcels of land, trading hands with the gravity of celestial bodies, set the stage for wars of attrition that could span lifetimes. Edward III, a young king, yet a determined claimant, perceived France's throne as his by right through his mother, Isabella of France, despite the French barons picking Philip of Valois to be their king. Such was the match that lit the kindling of animosity between England and France. This dispute transcended the men who wore the crowns. It was a contest between the notion of a nation under Norman Anjou's Plantagenet line and one under the assertive Valois. Edward, in 1340, styled himself as the King of France, solidifying his challenge and thrusting the kingdoms into a war that would see their landscapes scarred by battlefields for over a century. Armies would clash under these banners, voices would roar in these names, and history would remember the embattled journey of Edward III and Philip VI, for their decisions ripple in time as a prelude to a war that framed the future of Europe. The medieval era witnessed a monumental shift in military warfare, particularly during the Hundred Years' War. As kings and kingdoms vied for supremacy, they were also forced to re-examine their approaches to battle. With strategies constantly evolving, one significant advancement stood out with deadly consequence: the English longbow. The longbow's impact was nothing short of revolutionary, its dominance on the battlefield clear in the harrowing accounts of the French, who often found themselves outmatched by this formidable weapon. The Battle of Crécy in 1346 was an exhibition of the longbow's fierce efficiency. English forces, led by Edward III, utilized the longbow to devastating effect against the French cavalry. In the face of a hail of arrows, the charge of horsemen was rendered ineffective, marking a turning point in the war. This clash not only illuminated the tactical genius of the English in deploying their archers, but also heralded the waning dominance of heavily armored knights and the chivalric warfare that had defined the previous era. Turning the pages of history to the year 1356, we arrive at the Battle of Poitiers. Here the English longbowmen, under the command of Edward, the Black Prince, replicated the triumphs of their predecessors. Once again, the French found themselves ensnared in a lethal volley of arrows, their attempted formations disintegrating under the unrelenting onslaught. The defeat was so comprehensive that it even led to the capture of the French king, John II, a blow that echoed through the ranks of French nobility and bolstered the mythos of the English archer. The stage for the final act of this martial saga was set in 1415 at the Battle of Agincourt. It was Henry V who embraced the legacy of the longbow as he faced a numerically superior French force. Mud-laden and weary, the French knights were no match for the longbow's range and rapid rate of fire. It was a massacre that not only sealed the fate of many a French noble, but also cemented the longbow as the era's weapon of choice. Agincourt became a symbol of English determination and the effectiveness of adapting technology and tactics on the battlefield. Across these famed encounters, which raged from 1346 to 1415, the longbow proved to be more than a mere instrument of war. It was a harbinger of change, spelling the end of an era and ushering in new military doctrines. The Hundred Years' War was not just a series of battles, but a crucible in which the art of war was reforged, setting the scene for future conflicts and leaving an indelible imprint on the annals of military history. The Hundred Years' War, spanning from 1337 to 1453, was not just a series of clashes on the battlefield. It also stirred a maelstrom of economic destabilization that swept through the lives of countless individuals. Farmlands became wastelands under the boots and bloodshed of marching armies, disrupting the agrarian rhythm that sustained medieval life. With each harvest disrupted, the specter of famine loomed closer, tightening its grip around the bellies of the poor. The relentless taxation to fund the war effort bled dry the purses of peasants and nobles alike, as the weight of war's finance became an unbearable yoke upon the populace. In the throes of the Hundred Years' War, societal norms began to shift as dramatically as the tides of battle. With many men conscripted to fight, the roles of women expanded out of necessity. Fields still needed tending, and with the men at war, women took up the plow and the scythe. They managed estates, ran businesses, and even defended homes when the echoes of war rattled their doors. This upheaval of traditional roles was a crack in the foundations of medieval gender norms, hinting at the broader social reforms that would unfold in later centuries. And then there were the long-term changes, the deep currents that would shape the future of Europe. The Hundred Years' War catalyzed a growing sense of nationalism on both sides of the Channel. As people began to identify more with their king and country rather than their local lord, the seeds of the modern state were sown. This fertile but blood-soaked soil would give rise to the Renaissance, with its focus on humanism and inquiry, setting the stage for the Europe we know today. The war may have ended with the Treaty of Picquigny in 1475, but the societal transformations it spurred continued to resonate, echoing the march of progress and the ceaseless drum of time. In the annals of the Hundred Years' War, the echoes of legendary figures reverberate through time, their legacies carved deeply into the identities of nations. King Edward III of England, with an eye on the French crown, claimed it as his own. His ambition set afire a tumultuous struggle for power. Under his reign, the Battle of Crécy in 1346 saw the English longbows dominate, a victory that emboldened the English and petrified their adversaries. Yet this king also knew the bitter taste of setbacks, such as the plague that ravaged his kingdom and hampered his campaigns. Another icon, Henry V, the warrior king, famously triumphed at the Battle of Agincourt in 1415. With a smaller army, heavy in spirit but light in numbers, Henry's forces decimated the French nobility with the might of their longbows. His victory at Agincourt was not just a military success. It sparked a surge of national pride and set the stage for England to temporarily secure the French throne for Henry's heirs. Across the sea, in France, a young maiden rose from the obscurity of a village. Joan of Arc, the Maid of Orleans, driven by divine visions, became a herald of hope. She lifted the siege of Orleans in 1429, a turning point that invigorated the disheartened French. Though ultimately she faced a grim end at the stake, Joan's unyielding spirit later elevated her to sainthood. She remains a potent symbol of French identity and resilience. Then there was Charles VII, the Dauphin of France, initially deemed a weak leader. Joan's faith in him breathed life into his claim to the crown. With Joan's victories and the eventual expulsion of English forces after the war, Charles's reign saw the flourishing of the French Renaissance. His success in reclaiming France's territories solidified his legacy and contributed to the enduring mythos of a nation reunited under its rightful king. These paragons of valor and vision, Edward III, Henry V, Joan of Arc, and Charles VII, were far more than mere combatants in a protracted war. They were the architects of modern England and France. Through their ambitions, their triumphs, and even their defeats, they individually hued the narratives of their countries. Their stories are testament to how individuals can shape the vast edifice of history, leaving behind a legacy that transcends the battlefields and resounds through generations. As the Hundred Years' War drew to a close, Europe was left forever altered. The year 1475 marked the end of this protracted conflict with the Treaty of Pecquigny, an agreement that finally brought respite from the relentless strife. This treaty, signed by Louis XI of France and Edward IV of England, stipulated a 7-year truce alongside a substantial pension to be paid to the English monarch. While the accord did not draw new frontiers, it symbolized a weary acknowledgement that the era of open warfare had run its course. The long-standing rivalry dimmed, but the embers of national identities were just beginning to glow. In the aftermath of this grisly contest, England and France found themselves nursing the wounds of their lands and legacies. A palpable shift washed over their societies. From the ashes of war, a sense of national consciousness began to forge stronger than before. In England, the war had fostered unity against a common enemy and bolstered a distinct English identity. In France, the sense of national unity was even more profound, born from the struggle to expel an invader and reclaim the French crown's sovereignty. This was a time when languages matured, cultures crystallized, and collective stories were penned into the very psyche of each nation. So too did the aftermath set the latticework for the Renaissance and the rise of modern Europe. With the Hundred Years' War behind them, the nations of England and France could begin to nurture the seeds of innovation, exploration, and humanistic thought. The harsh lessons of the past cleaved the path for a burgeoning future, one where art, science, and the humanities would flourish as never before. As we cast our gaze upon the landscape of history, we see how the shadows of longbows and battle cries eventually gave way to the light of enlightenment and progress. It is a potent reminder that from the depths of despair and destruction can come the greatest leaps forward for civilization. You've been listening to Daily History Podcast. Like the longbowmen at Agincourt, your support helps us stand our ground in the fierce battle of content creation. If you enjoyed our foray into the 100 Years' War, don't forget to subscribe and join our History Legion. We invite you to cast your vote for our next topic. Just leave your suggestion in the comments below. The most liked idea might just become our next grand tale. Until then, stay curious, history aficionados. Thank you for your time, and remember, to know the future, one must understand the past. Farewell.